Good afternoon and welcome to this episode of the After Out podcast as we continue our spin through the world of college athletics. Today I'm pleased to be joined by the Vice President for Athletics for Fairfield University, Paul Schlickmann. Paul, how you doing this afternoon, I should
I'm fine.
say.
That's okay. I'm fine, thanks. I appreciate you having me. Good to be here.
Now, before we jump into the particulars, let me ask you this. As a Trinity College graduate, I can see the T in the background. Your
That's
alma
right.
mater just won a national championship.
They did.
How did that feel and what went through your mind when you can see that the school that you played for is now a national champion?
Yeah, it was very gratifying, very proud to be watching that. I watched the entire game and certainly had been following Coach Kaz throughout the season. Know him personally, consider him a friend. Um, Actually played hoops there, so doubly gratifying to see Trinity playing at such a high level. He's done an amazing job with that program, and ironically, I had dual connections with that Final Four matchup because with Wesleyan, because Joe Riley, the head coach of Wesleyan, was a teammate of mine. So multiple connections to that in Division III hoops, but certainly proud and excited for the Bantams to come home with a natty. That was really exciting.
As a Hartford native, I can tell you just from afar, it is good just to see the city just have a championship. It is phenomenal, even for the state. As a state, Connecticut definitely has a strong basketball pedigree. What does it mean that, there's another champion right in the state? You have UConn with all the success of the men's and women's
Yep.
team. Now you have Trinity. Now they're right there.
It's great for the game. It's great for the game of college basketball. There's so many um, good programs at multiple levels, across divisions 1, 2, and 3. And sometimes obviously the ones in Division 3 go under the radar a little bit. So it was really great to have them get their due. And these are programs that, you know, compete at a really high level. There's some really high caliber student athletes playing Division 3 athletics, and particularly in the NESCAC. I'm biased because I'm a product, but I think the NESCAC is pound for pound the toughest uh, Division 3 athletics conference in the country. And you can see it by virtue of how many sports they regularly compete for national championships in. So great to see. It's great for the game of basketball in the state for sure. And absolutely.
Now, one of the things that has kind of been a hot button issue in college administration, especially during athletics, is the enrollment cliff, where it seems as though there are less of a student pool than in years past. Is it something that you've seen, or is it something that is still kind of a bit of ways off?
Well, I would say from a Fairfield perspective, we are really fortunate. We have experienced unprecedented growth, so we are in a great spot. Um, we have grown our undergraduate enrollment significantly and progressively over the last few years. At the same time, we have done so with enhancing the caliber of our academic programs and enhancing our selectivity rate and the caliber of our incoming classes. So we are in a terrific spot in terms of the world of higher ed and the trends and where we fit in that. So I feel very fortunate to be at a place that is operating at a very high level successfully through these, tough times that are really hitting some schools hard. Um, so we haven't experienced it here directly, fortunately, but we always have to be mindful of trends in higher ed and be strategic about what we're doing and how we do it. Certainly not just institutionally, but athletically.
What is your approach to fundraising and alumni engagement, and how do you ensure that these two efforts align with Fairfield's overall mission?
That's a great question. I can answer that from both a philosophical standpoint and a structural standpoint. So philosophically, how do we approach fundraising as a department of athletics? My my staff, if they were sitting here, would know the answer before I say it. And I preach the idea that everybody's a fundraiser. Um, so we are fortunate to have a dedicated 3-person team for athletics advancement to coordinate our fundraising efforts. I am certainly integrally involved in that, as is our senior staff, but it is a department-wide effort to um, convey our narrative about who we are, about how we go about our business, um, not only from a recruiting standpoint, but to those who want to support our programs, be it season ticket holders, be it donors, be it alums, anybody who's part of our family who feels that Stags Athletics is worth supporting and with whom we have a connection. So it's and it goes a long way. Our coaches and our staff have really embraced that idea. So everybody's a storyteller, everybody's a fundraiser. Um, I do spend a significant amount of my time um, in those endeavors, and I think we're seeing um, continued success in that regard. We just had our Stag Giving Day, which is a university-wide effort, but also a big day for Stags Athletics. We were far north of $3 million, approaching $4 million from a university wide effort on Stag Giving Day, and our athletics portion of that was 1.2 million. So we had a great Stag Giving Day, indicative of and a record number of donors for that day, upwards of 1,700 donors.
One of the
Um,
things that, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say we've got a good story to tell. I think we're doing a good job of telling it. A lot of that is stewardship and creating connectivity and relationships with our constituents and our Stags family members. So I would say those numbers are indicative of a really good, authentic process that we have that I think we're people. It's easy to sell something you believe in and have people buy into that. And I think we're selling something that does align with our mission and our values. And that's, in a nutshell, it's the holistic educational process and the overall development of our student athletes with that in mind. And so we have a constituent base that really believes in that. And I think in this day and age of Division I athletics, it's really important to continue to focus on that, because I think that's still ultimately the core value proposition that is really important to a vast majority of prospective student athletes and parents. And I think that narrative is resonating, and we're seeing competitive success as a result of adherence to our core mission and our core values and our beliefs. And I think our constituents are seeing that too, and that's why they want to invest in it.
One of the things I found most interesting are the four tenets of Stags Compete, Stags Care, Stags Lead, and Stags Grow. You rarely find an academic institution who has laid out such a thoroughly profound set of tenets and guidelines to govern by. Was this a long time coming? Was this something that you had always thought about, or how did that process come in trying to develop these?
I really appreciate you bringing that up, Terrance, because it is something that is um, that we are really proud of, but is critically important to us as our daily guidepost. So those are our cultural commitments, which you just outlined: compete, care, lead, and grow. And we were very goes back to my first year and a half on the job in trying to gain a very clear understanding of what it meant, what it means to be a stag. So we went through a very comprehensive process to try and um, compile those tenets, those values, those beliefs that succinctly articulated that, but also at the same time do it in a translational way that aligned with our Jesuit values and mission as a university. And I think we accomplished both. Um, we think about those, we talk about those, we try and foster them on a daily basis. I think it has become somewhat um, um, palpable. Not, I wouldn't say somewhat. I think it's become palpable and organic in our ecosystem, in our culture here in athletics. Um, our athletes know it, believe in it, can articulate it. We evaluate ourselves on those four cultural commitments. We build strategic planning around those four tenets. So everything we do is based in that. And I think it has really served us well. And again, per your previous question, it bridges, you know, the the core value system with adhering to it so that you achieve positive and successful outcomes, and then your constituents want to continue to invest in it and believe in it. So it carries that bridge all the way through, and um, it takes very intentional investment of time and thought by all of us, me in particular, to try and make sure that we're doing a good job with that. Culture can't just be something that you put on paper. It's something that has to be worked at on a daily basis. I believe we're doing a good job of it, and credit our coaches and our athletes for buying into it and carrying it forward with great success and intentionality.
On top of the tenants, I noticed that there's been a profound success in your tenure with fundraising. You had a $51 million donor-funded sports arena built. A couple of questions. One, what is your process? And two, how did you manage to pull it all together?
Well, the 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 general answer is somewhat trite, but it does take a village. And so I would start with this. We are very fortunate that we have a alumni network, a donor base that is very passionate about Stags athletics and our programs and the student athletes in those programs. Um, I'm also very fortunate that to have a leader, our president, Dr. Mark Nemec, as well as a board of trustees who believe in athletics as an integral part of the holistic educational process, and as part of our um, Jesuit ecosystem, if you will. They believe in that. We believe in athletics as a vehicle to enhance campus spirit and pride, and ultimately believe in athletics as a vehicle to help us achieve our overarching university objective, which is to achieve national prominence. Now, there's a lot that goes into a lot of factors and a lot of boxes and buckets to check to achieve national prominence, but we're really fortunate to have a leadership structure that values athletics as a key vehicle in achieving those objectives. So when you have all of that in place, I wouldn't say it makes it easy, but it makes it it provides the avenue to to go raise $52 million for an arena. But it's not just a basketball arena. It is a modern, it is an example of a modern structure that shows how Fairfield is committed to modern excellence in this current environment of higher ed. It is a shining example of valuing the experience of decades of students who have great memories of experiencing basketball games in our old barn alumni hall. And a whole slew of other examples. It's a great conduit for the town and the county and all our constituents in the local communities as a convening point. It is housing a lot of our major campus events. So it's a convening point, a gathering point. It's much more than just an arena that hosts men's and women's basketball games and women's volleyball games, but it's been a complete game changer for us. And I think, again, just a shining example, a gem in the middle of campus that is a great example of what Fairfield's all about, and how we have our foot on the gas to to achieve modern excellence and do so with all the right things in the right way.
One of the things that people don't really delve into, but I'm going to ask you this. When you look at measuring your admin success or the program success that goes beyond wins and losses, are there any metrics or criteria that you use that will say, you know what, we're having a good year, not because of the wins and losses, but because of X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, that's a great question. Certainly something I think about all the time. What immediately comes to mind is what I consistently try and remind our athletes, our staff, our coaches about, and I do believe this is any competitive successes we achieve are a result of doing a lot of things the right way. And again, that goes back to our value system, our cultural commitments, and trying to adhere to those and trying to operate with integrity and effectively in a number of ways. And I do believe that if we are providing a high caliber, holistic educational experience for athletes, I think they're going to compete well. That means, we're doing a good job with providing them with the resources and the support they need to achieve at a high level. Um, so I think that's a significant component of it. How do we measure ourselves? There's a number of ways that we measure outcomes. Obviously, on the academic side, we have incredibly high achieving athletes. Our GPAs are at an all-time high by team. Every one of our teams had above a 3.2 this most recent semester, and we've set all kinds of records in a number of ways, deans with students, etc. Last year, we were fortunate to finish first um, in our MAC Commissioners Cup standings and win that award for the first time in 12 years. So that's one measuring stick of trying to are we doing a good job of saying we want to achieve comprehensive excellence across the board? So it's a good indicator that we're putting a lot of teams in a position to be successful. And as we continue to evolve and continue to place achieving national prominence, as an overarching objective for the university, the university again is we all look at metrics in terms of collegiate rankings. U.S. News and World Report as one example. On the national side, beginning to compare that data and Fairfield's climb in that with how we stack up in the Learfield Cup rankings. So those are two that can kind of come together to indicate, I would say, achievement at a high level in both. So that's evolving for us as a barometer and a metric. But again, I would say that those are still indicators of how we go about our business, and I think we're doing some really good things as a university and an athletics program.
When you're not in the office, how do you get away from the job?
I try to spend as much time as I can with my two children. Um, my daughter's 11 in sixth grade. My son is 8. Um, try to be a good dad. Try to be a good family guy. Um, Part of that inevitably is trying to do an effective job of incorporating them into what is a pretty consuming, very busy schedule. Fortunately, they embrace that. My wife and my children, and so I have a great team at home that um, really are great fans and supporters of me and our endeavors, and so I think it's a lifestyle. Um, I do the past 2 years I have coached my daughter basketball team the last couple of years. So that's been a really enjoyable, rewarding outlet for me to try and spend quality time with her and frankly and to give back to the community a little bit too in that regard. And certainly something I've done with my son too. I wasn't the head coach, but I helped coach his little league team as well. So that's probably it. I try and spend as much time with them and try and make sure I'm being a good dad in the midst of this crazy schedules that we have.
And explain it. Now, as a Connecticut guy, where's your favorite place to eat and what's on your plate?
Hmm. Wow, that's a great one. So everybody wants to talk about pizza, right? So I have experienced it in a number of different ways. In my early years, my first job out of graduate school, my first full-time job was at Yale. So largely considered the Connecticut pizza capital of the world. Um, so there's really, there's, I don't want to leave anybody out, but there's probably four big names that everybody talks about. Um, Sally's, Pepe's, Modern, and Bar. I happen to have a propensity for Modern back in the day. Um, Now that I am down here and those franchises have expanded or those names have expanded, we actually do have Pepe's and Sally's right in town here. Um, so I do enjoy a good hot piping Pepe's pizza out of the oven for sure. But if you're a foodie, Fairfield it's a great college town. It's a great place to live. I'm fortunate to live right in town. There's so many good restaurants. Um, and so really amazing choices across the board and some really good places to enjoy a good meal for sure.
If you are just kind of transparent, if you could play 5-on-5 full court with four players, regardless of era,
Ooh, wow.
regardless of position, who'd you have on your team, and who would coach it?
Wow. That's one of the best questions ever. Um, okay. Um, Probably Larry Bird, one of them. I grew up in Massachusetts. Um, I would say Larry Bird be one of them. I would say um, Larry and Magic. I can't say one without the other because I kind of grew up with that rivalry and watching those games and watching those two go at it. Um, I would say um, and I'll go back a couple. I'm going to stick to the Celtics Lakers rivalries, and I'm going to go back and say I'll cross eras as you indicated, and I'll say Jerry West and John Havlicek. Um, Couple of names from the past. Um, and who would I have coach? Wow, that's a great one. Um, let's say Pat Riley.
Three. Now, I've
Uh,
always had a kind of a back and forth with fans who are younger who I maintain that Larry Bird, even though I'm not a Celtics fan, I'm a Knicks fan, Larry Bird is the greatest shooter of NBA history. Can you explain, as someone who also grew up in that period, like what you saw in Bird that just we haven't seen since?
I yeah, I almost feel like his um what he did, how he did it, how good he was is actually there's a greater understanding of it now than there ever was. I think. And I say that from a personal perspective too. And I say um as someone who was um probably an average athlete who just worked hard and was a grinder, he was relentless in his work ethic, in his preparation, in his repetition. Um and just by sheer um, passion and dogged approach to getting better made himself a great player. Um, and I think that is what um, what made him a great competitor. I mean, he was inherently like competitive as all get out. Um, but probably um, and probably underrated from a skill perspective as an athlete, but just by sheer um, persistence and commitment made himself a great player. That's what I admire most about him.
He is the he's the vice president for athletics of Fairfield University, Paul Schlickmann. Paul, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Ad Drop Podcast.
It has been my pleasure. You've had some great questions. I really appreciate them. A little off the grid. It was good.